As the disciples marveled at the beauty of the Jerusalem temple, Jesus spoke a prophecy that startled them all. This magnificent temple, the time will come when not one stone will be left upon another. Everything will be torn down and left in ruins. Around 2,000 years ago, Jesus spread the gospel across the land. But as his number of followers grew, it angered the religious powers of Judaism at the time. Driven by hatred, they sought to capture and kill him. At that time, Jesus returned to Jerusalem, the sacred city of the Jewish faith. There, he predicted his own fate, that he would be crucified by wicked men. Because of this, many believe that the nation of Israel later endured great suffering and sorrow. In 1967, Israel regained full control over Jerusalem, nearly 2,000 years after losing it. The holy city of the three major religions finally returned to Jewish hands. But this raises a deep question. Why has this city chosen by God been the center of endless wars and conflict? Why has this divinely chosen land become the site of relentless struggle among the three great religions for thousands of years, centuries-long religious conflicts? Isn't this the ultimate irony of humanity? So what exactly is the root of this baffling contradiction? Today, let's talk about one of the most controversial topics, the holy city of Jerusalem. At 11:15 a.m. on June 0, 1967, in the old city of Jerusalem, Jordanian soldiers were busy in non-stop operations. Waves of deafening artillery shells fired from Jordan rained down on Jewish residential areas within the city. More than 6,000 artillery rounds were launched in a short time. The bombardment hit the Israeli presidential residence and the Knesset building. At the same time, three other cities in Israel, Netanya, Frin, likely Rishon LeZion, and Kaaba, Kfar Saba, were also heavily bombed by Jordan's Air Force. Israel's Minister of Defense at the time, Mr. Moshe Dayan, immediately commanded ground forces in Jerusalem to launch a small-scale counterattack. Shortly after, he ordered the Israeli Air Force to seize the moment when Jordanian aircraft returned to refuel and bombed the Jordanian air bases, destroying all their military planes. After eliminating the air threat completely, after eliminating the threat from Jordan's Air Force, the Israeli military launched a direct counteroffensive into the center of Jerusalem. Israeli paratroopers descended into urban areas controlled by Jordan, then split into three small groups, quickly advancing inward. Gunfire and explosions echoed throughout the city, blanketing Jerusalem in chaos. Soldiers were locked in brutal combat, clashing near the burning remains of tanks. At that time, King Hussein of Jordan stood on Victoria Augusta Castle, watching the battle unfold. At first, he remained calm as the fighting began, but when he saw his troops repeatedly lose ground, the king began to panic. He immediately jumped into his military jeep and rushed toward the Jordan Valley. There, he encountered Jordanian troops retreating from northern Jerusalem. After thinking for a while, King Hussein decided to return to the castle. But it was too late. The Jordanian forces had collapsed, and the castle was no longer a safe place to stay. Ultimately, he was forced to withdraw to Jordan, defeated and demoralized. After 2 days of fierce fighting, the Israeli military had full control over Jerusalem. Moshe Dayan, Israel's Minister of Defense, brought two high-ranking generals, Yitzhak Rabin and Uzi Narkis, to climb to the top of the Temple Mount, which had just been secured. The temple is the most sacred site in ancient Judaism. It is said that both the first and second temples were built right here, on the Temple Mount. 3 Israeli soldiers walked directly to the western side of the mount, stopping in front of the famous Western Wall, the last remnant of the Second Temple. There, Rabin was moved to tears. He felt, all the sacrifices, all the bloodshed that Israel had endured were worth it. It was all truly sacred. So why, in that moment, did Dayan and Rabin display such emotional, youthful joy? We'll talk more about that in the next part. The opening war scene you just witnessed was not a dramatization. It was a real historical event, part of the Third Arab-Israeli War in 1967, also known as the Six-Day War. After this battle, Israel gained full control of the holy city of Jerusalem. General Rabin called it the Six-Day War because the entire conflict lasted only 6 days, yet it completely changed the political landscape of the Middle East and altered the course of global history. To understand the cause of this war, we must go back to the founding of the State of Israel. Let's go back in time to the year 1918, when World War I ended and the entire geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically. Before World War I, the Ottoman Empire maintained tight control over what are today Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. But after the war, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. These territories became mandated regions, governed under the supervision of a newly formed international organization at the time, the League of Nations, the predecessor of what we now know as the United Nations. The League of Nations assigned these regions to be managed by Britain and France. Britain was given authority over Palestine, which included present-day Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. The British, wanting to simplify things, quickly carved out Jordan as a separate country and handed control to their loyal ally, the local Hashemite clan. This Hashemite family became the royal family of Jordan today. Britain thought that managing just 2 regions, Palestine and Israel, would be less trouble. But to their surprise, instead of saving effort, they ended up entangled in 2 of the most complex and unresolved conflicts of modern history. Because on this land, 2 ideologies are growing stronger at the same time, and wherever ideology takes root, peace is often absent. One is Zionism of the Jewish people, also known as the movement for the restoration of a Jewish homeland. The other is Pan-Arabism. Zionism rose to prominence at the end of the 19th century with the aim of establishing a Jewish state on the ancient land of Israel, known as Zion, and making it a safe haven for Jews around the world. In the Bible, Zion initially referred to the city of David, built by King David, and later came to mean Jerusalem and the entire land of Israel. So what is Pan-Arabism? It emerged in the early 20th century and advocated for the unification of all Arab countries under the Islamic banner into a single nation, or at least a shared ideology, with close political and cultural alliances. Although these 2 ideologies stem from different religious and historical contexts, they are essentially forms of modern nationalism. While they may sound like positive ideals for advancing one's own people, in practical terms, the outcomes are far more complicated. It sounds all good in theory, but imagine this. The tree you planted grows over your neighbor's wall, and then their children start picking fruit from your tree. If both households keep calculating losses and gains, there will never be a peaceful day. Supporters of Zionism, with the help of the richest family in the world at that time, the Rothschild family, successfully gained backing from the British Empire, which allowed their movement to grow rapidly. The founder of the Rothschild family was Meyer Amschel Rothschild, a German-born Jew from the late 18th century, known for his sharp business mind. He began his career by running a small business and opening a bank in Frankfurt, Germany. Later, his 5 sons inherited and expanded on his business instincts, opening banks across Europe and turning the Rothschilds into a dominant force in European finance. But they didn't stop there. The Rothschild family also expanded into critical sectors like mining and energy. By the early 20th century, the Rothschilds had become so powerful that a single step from them could shake the world. And they also served as a key launchpad for the growth of the Zionist movement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Thank you so much. In the early 20th century, the Zionist movement, driven by the efforts of the Rothschild family, achieved a major breakthrough when the British government issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917. This declaration marked a pivotal moment in the history of Zionism. Lord Balfour, former Foreign Secretary and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was the figure who made this announcement. In the 1917 document, the British Empire, still considered the world's leading power at the time, explicitly expressed its support for the Jewish people, allowing them to immigrate and build a national homeland in Palestine, a territory under British mandate. But this raises an important question. What about the other ethnic groups already living in Palestine at the time? The declaration included only a brief mention of ensuring the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities, but it did not address any broader rights, such as land ownership, political participation, or legal representation. As a result, after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, non-Jewish citizens living within its borders were not required by law to perform military service. If they volunteered, they could still serve in the military. However, those who did not serve faced restrictions in other political rights, including voting and government representation. Regarding the Balfour Declaration, after it was issued, Jews around the world were filled with renewed hope. At that time, the Jewish community became extremely enthusiastic. Many Jews who faced hardships or discrimination in their home countries chose to emigrate to Palestine to build a new world for themselves. And so, by the 1930s, the Jewish population had grown from a small local minority into a significant presence. Half of Jerusalem's population was Jewish. And when there are too many people and too many differing opinions, conflict becomes inevitable. In the 1930s, Arabs in Palestine began to rise up against the British. In response, Britain sent troops to suppress the revolt. However, before long, even within the Zionist movement, extremist groups began to emerge. These nationalist extremists were also dissatisfied with the British government and launched a series of terrorist attacks that put the British in a difficult position. Moreover, the global situation continued to shift rapidly. Not long after, World War II broke out, and flames of war spread across Europe. Although Britain eventually emerged as one of the victorious powers, it suffered heavily from the war, losing manpower and depleting its resources. Britain at that time had hundreds of urgent matters to handle. Although it did not suffer overwhelming direct damage from the war, aside from the period when it was bombed by Germany before World War II, its consumer rationing system wasn't fully abolished until 1956. The British could barely manage their own situation, let alone continue dealing with the chaos in the Middle East. So they decided, it's time to let go. In November 1947, the United Nations General Assembly passed a partition plan which proposed dividing the territory of Palestine, then under British control, into two separate states, one for the Jewish people and one for the Arabs. The Jewish population received the decision with great joy, celebrating in the streets. After nearly 2,000 years of wandering, they had finally secured a homeland of their own. However, the Arabs were not nearly as joyful. During those thousands of years, the Jews were scattered. The land was not empty. People were already living there, namely the Arabs. By that point, they had become the majority population in the region. Upon hearing the decision, they immediately rejected it. "We've been living here for thousands of years. The Arab population strongly protested. "We are the native people here, not them. What gives the Jews the right to come here, stare us down, and take our land? If the Germans persecuted the Jews, why not give them land in Germany to build their state? And if you Americans support them so much, why not give them a piece of your own land? Why is our land being taken away?" And when you think about it, their argument isn't entirely unreasonable. But the Jews were firm in their stance. "We're not going anywhere. This is the land promised to us by God since ancient times." Exactly how ancient? That part remains vague. Tensions escalated quickly. Local Arab communities began organizing militias, confronting Jewish groups head-on. At the same time, neighboring Arab countries such as Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq expressed deep dissatisfaction with the UN's decision. "If the United Nations won't give us a proper explanation, then we'll make one ourselves." Under the leadership of Egypt, these countries formed a unified Arab alliance, preparing to settle the matter with force. At 4 p.m. on May 14, 1948, the man widely regarded as the founding father of modern Israel, David Ben-Gurion, officially declared the establishment of the State of Israel. Right after finishing his speech and media interview, Ben-Gurion rushed out of the venue. He knew clearly that Israel's declaration of independence was effectively a declaration of war against its Arab neighbors. He had to act quickly, mobilizing troops and preparing for what he was certain would be an imminent large-scale invasion by the Arab coalition. Sure enough, within days, the Arab League launched an all-out assault, marking the beginning of the First Arab-Israeli War, also known as the First Middle East War. The Arab side formed a coalition of 8 nations, deploying over 165,000 troops. Meanwhile, Israel, pressed for time, could only gather a semi-military force of around 28,000, made up of local militias, former extremist groups, and a small number of professional officers. The enemy was strong, and Israel was weak, so it's no surprise that Ben-Gurion was deeply anxious. General Moshe Dayan and Yitzhak Rabin, who would later become Israel's Minister of Defense, were both present in the ranks at the time. They were still young then, but the tension was already so great that they were sweating with nerves as war loomed just ahead. As the war began, the Arab coalition, equipped with modern weaponry and professionally trained forces, advanced with great momentum. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery of Britain, a famed World War II general, confidently predicted that the military gap between the two sides was so great that Israel would be completely defeated within 2 weeks, a brand new nation doomed to collapse just after its birth. However, what actually unfolded was far beyond Montgomery's expectations. Israel swiftly organized its national defense forces, established a formal military structure, launched intensive military training, and accelerated recruitment. As a result, they managed to hold off the Arab coalition's powerful offensive. On top of that, the United Nations stepped in quickly to mediate, and after 8 weeks of fighting, both sides agreed to a first ceasefire. But following the ceasefire, the Arab nations began looking out for their own interests. The war wasn't over yet, but each believed victory was already in their grasp, and started thinking about what kind of compensation they could extract from Israel. Behind the scenes, each side quietly calculated how to benefit from the ongoing conflict. The Arab countries were still aiming to seize more territory to gain leverage in future peace negotiations. But Israel had no interest in sitting down to negotiate peace with the Arabs. Instead, during the ceasefire period, they used their global Jewish network to recruit numerous veterans and officers with extensive World War II combat experience. Although officially the United Nations had imposed an arms embargo on both sides, Israel still secretly managed to purchase a large quantity of leftover military equipment from World War II, especially from Czechoslovakia. As a result, in just 28 short days of ceasefire, Israel was able to dramatically improve its previously dire situation of weapon shortages, which had plagued them during the first 8 weeks of war. Then, on July 8th, just one day before the ceasefire was set to end, Egyptian air forces led a renewed offensive, hoping to deal a decisive blow and crush Israel once and for all. But this time, they had stepped on a landmine. The Israeli Defense Forces launched a full-scale counteroffensive that lasted 10 days, catching the Arab coalition completely off guard and pummeling them with Israel's newly strengthened military might. People were stunned, asking, how did they suddenly turn into someone completely different? The Arab coalition quickly lost most of the territory they had previously occupied. On July 18th, the United Nations issued a second ceasefire order. However, Israel once again used the ceasefire to strengthen its forces, and afterward launched a third offensive. This attack was so powerful that Egypt, the leader of the Arab bloc at the time, could no longer hold its ground, and was forced to enter peace talks and sign a ceasefire agreement. As for the King of Jordan, he was the grandfather of King Hussein, the figure we mentioned at the beginning of this story, and he was the reigning monarch during the First Arab-Israeli War. At that time, he sent an elite force to attack Jerusalem, driving the Israeli troops led by Yitzhak Rabin out of the Holy City, and took tight control of both Jordan and the West Bank. After securing those military gains, Jordan unilaterally declared a ceasefire with Israel and withdrew from the battlefield. Since Israel was not yet strong enough to push Jordan out of Jerusalem, Jordan was viewed in the Arab world as the only country to have truly benefited from the war. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Thank you so much. The remaining Arab nations gained nothing from the war. They were the defeated, having brought shame to their countries, and were left to hang their heads in humiliation. However, the entire Arab world never forgot this disgrace, the shame brought upon them by the foreign entity called Israel. And so they waited patiently for their moment of revenge. From 1948 to 1967, over nearly 20 years, although there were occasional clashes between the Arab world and Israel, none of them were large in scale, and neither side suffered major losses. The most famous conflict during this period was the Suez Canal crisis of 1956, also referred to as the Second Arab-Israeli War. At that time, Israel, backed by Britain and France, launched an attack on Egypt. However, due to U.S. intervention, no side emerged as a clear victor. Looking back to 1952, Egypt underwent a major shift. The Free Officers movement launched a coup and overthrew the monarchy of King Farouk. A group of young officers quickly rose to establish a new government. By 1956, President Gamal Abdel Nasser had come to power, greeted with cheers from the people. He was nicknamed a once-in-a-century talent, and once this remarkable leader took office, he immediately drew the admiration and hopes of the entire Arab world. Nasser quickly gained widespread recognition. Many Arab leaders even referred to him as the leader above all, and a glowing halo of power was placed upon his head. As expected, Nasser became overly proud and confident. and immediately called on the Arab world to unite and launch a decisive battle against Zionism, embodied by Israel, a nation supported by Western powers. Arab nations responded with great enthusiasm, shouting in unison, "We must have revenge! We will make Israel kneel!" This was the backdrop leading up to the Six-Day War in 1967. By late May 1967, the Egyptian army, under Nasser's leadership, was overflowing with confidence. Nasser believed the moment for revenge had arrived, and this time, Israel would be crushed. Nasser formed a military alliance with Jordan and Syria. King Hussein of Jordan was also full of confidence, mobilizing for a major offensive. Egypt sent 100,000 regular troops into the Sinai Peninsula. Syria's armored divisions moved close to the Israeli border, while Jordan's air force repeatedly flew near Israeli airspace to flex their power. Israel was surrounded on 3 fronts, and war seemed inevitable. At that time, Israel's prime minister was no longer David Ben-Gurion, but Levi Eshkol, a cautious and soft-spoken leader. His strategy was to pursue every possible diplomatic solution, only going to war if absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, Chief of Staff Yitzhak Rabin was so anxious that his legs trembled, unable to stay still, knowing full well that this war would determine Israel's survival. Israeli military officers repeatedly urged Prime Minister Levi Eshkol to launch a preemptive strike, but he remained unmoved. At the same time, another figure was restless and agitated, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, one of Israel's most brilliant military commanders. Meanwhile, on the Egyptian side, seeing that Israel was showing no signs of action, their generals boasted confidently to President Nasser, "Rest assured, sir, this time it's the Arab coalition that will strike first." However, that boast turned out to be premature. On June 5th, after carefully planning and positioning, Israel launched a surprise preemptive strike, targeting Egypt's air bases and destroying most of the Egyptian Air Force while it was still on the ground. This gave Israel immediate air superiority. Nevertheless, Egyptian ground forces continued to resist fiercely in the Sinai Peninsula. Despite having lost their air support, Egypt's infantry managed to temporarily hold their ground against Israel's offensive. But eventually, Nasser and his ineffective military commanders fell into disarray and ordered a full retreat from Sinai. During the retreat, the Egyptian forces were ambushed, suffering heavy losses. King Hussein of Jordan, meanwhile, lost control of Jerusalem, and along with it, the entire West Bank in this war. Egypt lost control of the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank slipped from Jordan's hands. Meanwhile, the so-called once-in-a-century talent, Nasser, lost his presidency and was forced to resign on his own accord. 3 years later, he died of heart disease. King Hussein, though he did not abdicate, fell into a state of long-term emotional instability. Whenever he met someone, he would mutter to himself, "I was so foolish. Why did I let the West Bank and Jerusalem slip away?" And just like that, in both Arab-Israeli wars, the Arab alliance suffered crushing defeats, while Israelis celebrated in joy, for they had finally reclaimed their sacred national city, Jerusalem. As we mentioned at the start of the story, after the Six-Day War, Generals Rabin and Dayan climbed up the Temple Mount, looking down upon Jerusalem. In that moment, they behaved like fresh university graduates. One of them exclaimed, "How sacred this is!" while the other collapsed to the ground, overcome with emotion, weeping silently, unable to say a word. Both were battle-hardened generals, the kind of men who wouldn't flinch even if a mountain fell in front of them. Yet at that moment, they were so overwhelmed, so deeply moved. Their connection to Jerusalem was not just about strategy or victory. It was a spiritual bond with the roots of their people. To understand the deeper roots of this conflict, we must go back in time to the origins of Jerusalem. In the most widely read version of the Bible, it is written that the Jewish people are the chosen nation, and that God designated the land of Canaan as their homeland. Canaan, in modern terms, roughly corresponds to the area known as Palestine in the 20th century. In the Hebrew Bible, there are many prophecies that emphasize Jerusalem as the city chosen by God. During the reign of King David, around the 10th century BCE, the Jewish people established Jerusalem as the capital of their kingdom. During the era of David and his son Solomon, Jerusalem was likely still a small city, and in truth, the kingdom of Israel itself was a modest-sized nation. But by the second half of the 7th century BCE, during the reign of King Josiah, ancient Israel had grown into a regional power. As surrounding empires began to weaken, King Josiah grew ambitious, seeking to reclaim territories in the north that had once been held by the Assyrian Empire. This led to a clash between Egypt and ancient Israel, as Egyptian forces marched into Canaan, ravaging the land of the Israelites, and King Josiah was killed in battle during the confrontation. And so, ancient Israel was overthrown just as it was rising. In the 6th century BCE, the Israelites were conquered by the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The first temple, built by King Solomon, was also completely destroyed, marking the end of the First Temple period. The Jewish people were exiled to Babylon, where they lived for nearly half a century, a period known in history as the Babylonian exile. Later, Neo-Babylon was defeated by the Achaemenid dynasty of the Persian Empire. The Persians had a relatively tolerant religious policy, allowing the Jews to return to their homeland. Thus, the Jewish people returned to Jerusalem and built the Second Temple, initiating the Second Temple period in their history. We covered this in detail in our recent video on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Feel free to check that out for more context. Afterward, the entire Mediterranean region underwent Hellenization. The Jews repeatedly came under the rule of foreign powers, including the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt and the Seleucid Empire. By the late 2nd century BCE, descendants of the Jewish Maccabees established the Hasmonean dynasty. However, by the 1st century CE, the Jewish people once again entered a period of turmoil. Disaster truly struck. At that time, the region was under the rule of the Roman Empire. Due to deep-rooted conflicts over religious and political ideology, in 66 CE, the Jewish people launched a major rebellion against Rome. In response, the Roman Empire carried out a brutal and merciless crackdown. By 70 CE, the Roman army laid siege to the city of Jerusalem. 60,000 Roman soldiers surrounded and attacked the city for 5 months, until they finally breached the city gates. Once inside, the Roman troops went on a rampage, slaughtering indiscriminately. Worse still, they destroyed the most sacred structure in the hearts of the Jewish people, the Second Temple. Those who survived were forced to flee, scattered to all corners of the world. From that point on, the Jewish people essentially lost their homeland, entering a period of diaspora that would last more than 2,000 years, until the founding of modern Israel in 1948. In truth, the Middle East has always been a land marked by endless war, and Jerusalem has remained at the very heart of these conflicts. In the ancient world, many civilizations experienced great prosperity followed by decline, and some even lost their nations entirely. Ancient Assyria and Babylon are prime examples. After their collapse, they never had another chance to be restored. So why were the Jewish people able to return and re-establish their nation after 2,000 years of diaspora? The answer lies in the profound spiritual significance of the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is like a guiding light, a beacon in the hearts of the Jewish people, functioning like a magnetic field that draws the hearts of countless generations, keeping their internal compass always pointing toward it. It is not only a holy city for Jews, but also a sacred land for both Muslims and Christians. Jerusalem is often referred to as the city both in heaven and on earth, because in Judaism, it is considered the earthly dwelling place of God, and thus seen as a heavenly city. In Islam, Jerusalem also holds immense spiritual importance. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, located on the ancient Temple Mount in Jerusalem, is the third holiest site in Islam, ranking just after Mecca and Medina. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to leave a comment, hit the like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Thank you so much. The Kaaba in Mecca and the Prophet's Mosque in Medina are the two holiest sites in Islam. However, Muslims also believe that a great miracle mentioned in the Quran took place in Jerusalem. The story goes like this. On the night of the 17th of Rajab, year 1 in the Islamic calendar, which corresponds to the night of July 27th, 621 CE, God commanded the angel Gabriel to bring the celestial steed Buraq to Mecca to receive the Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad mounted Buraq, and under Gabriel's guidance, in an instant, he arrived at the farthest mosque, which is Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. This event is known as the Night Journey, Isra. After that, Muhammad ascended to the heavens on the back of Buraq. In some hadiths, narrations of the Prophet's sayings, it is said that after reaching Al-Aqsa, Muhammad ascended from the foundation stone on the Temple Mount and passed through 7 levels of heaven. When he reached the 6th level, he met Moses, Musa, the great prophet of Judaism. Upon reaching the 7th heaven, Muhammad was shown visions of both paradise and hell. At the end of the journey, he was illuminated by the light of God and received divine revelations directly from Allah. During his ascension to heaven, Muhammad received a command from God stating that from that day forward, Muslims must pray 50 times per day. When Muhammad descended back to the 6th heaven, he encountered Moses, Musa, again. Moses advised him, "Praying 50 times a day is too much for your followers. If that's the case, how will they be able to do anything else?" So Muhammad returned and pleaded with God to reduce the number of daily prayers. He repeated this process 9 times, each time asking for a reduction. Eventually, God agreed to lower it to 5 prayers per day, which is the current practice of 5 daily prayers in Islam. The journey concluded at Sidrat al-Muntaha, and Muhammad returned to Mecca just as dawn was breaking. This miraculous event is commemorated in the Islamic holiday of Miraj, celebrating the Prophet Muhammad's night journey and ascension to the heavens. For this reason, Jerusalem is considered a sacred and blessed city by Muslims, a place for pilgrimage, and a site of deep spiritual connection with God. Many Muslims deeply long to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, and the Miraj tree, Sidrat al-Muntaha, all located within the ancient walled city of Jerusalem. They view such a journey as a spiritual privilege, a way to feel closer to Allah. Additionally, Christianity also regards Jerusalem as a holy city, as many of the key events in the life of Jesus Christ took place there. Jesus experienced the Passover in Jerusalem when he was still a young man, and then twice more after he began his public ministry. The Last Supper, his trial before Pontius Pilate, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension. All of these familiar events took place in Jerusalem. Jerusalem holds several sacred sites for Christian pilgrims, such as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is believed to be the site of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. After Islam rose in the 7th century, Muslim forces reclaimed Jerusalem from the Byzantine Empire. From that point onward, this holy city was no longer part of the Christian world. As a result, reclaiming the Holy Land and saving the Church of the Holy Sepulchre became vital missions for Christendom. From the 11th to the 13th century, Christians and Muslims fought fierce battles, contesting control of Jerusalem for nearly 300 years. In the final year of the 11th century, specifically in 1099 CE, the First Crusade, Eastern Campaign, successfully captured Jerusalem. From then on, the Crusaders established a series of colonies along the eastern Mediterranean coast, known as the Levantine Crusader states. The Crusader states of Christianity did exist, but after just over 80 years, the tide turned. The great Muslim leader Saladin reclaimed the Holy City. By 1291 CE, the last Crusader stronghold on the eastern Mediterranean fell, and the centuries-long conflict over Jerusalem between Christianity and Islam came to an end. In truth, Jerusalem still holds a profoundly symbolic meaning, tied to biblical prophecy. It is believed that after the re-establishment of Israel, a monumental event will occur. The Day of Judgment will be near. This sacred land, fought over by 3 of the world's great religions for millennia, finally returned to Jewish hands in 1967. So, it's no wonder why the 2 hardened, battle-worn generals, Rabin and Dayan, wept with joy. They knew they had witnessed a prophecy fulfilled with their own eyes. The land of Canaan, later known as Palestine, was called a land flowing with milk and honey in Jewish scriptures. But climates have changed, and if you were to visit today, would you still see milk and honey, or just a landscape covered in dust, stones, and arid silence? Dozens of generations of conflict and bloodshed. One has to wonder, is this really what God intended to see? Amid a land filled with hostility and endless struggle, there stands a sacred holy site. Is that not a bitter irony of humankind? A city called the Holy City should be a place of peace and beauty. Yet, some say, the holier the land, the less it can be shared. Then what truly defines a sacred land? What makes a holy city holy? What about you? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below. And with that, our story today comes to an end. If you found this video or the content on Miss Ruby's channel meaningful or thought-provoking, please share it with a friend so they can explore it too. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and see you next time. Yet on this very soil, countless lives have been lost and buried,